So what we're going to talk about in this video is debugging slow SQL queries and also installing a debug bar for Laravel to help us to debug slow SQL queries. And the debug bar can also help you debug other parts of your application that could be slow, maybe related to AJAX requests or different things like that. But in this video, we're just going to talk about using it for optimizing SQL queries. So the situation that I found myself in was I was actually just refreshing the FCL page, and it was taking a long time to load the page, and initially I didn't know the reason it was taking such a long time. I suspected it was because of an SQL query, and after I installed the debug bar I was able to confirm that. So basically what I'm going to do in this video is show you how to install the debug bar, and we're also going to look a little bit at SQL query optimization. So that page load just took 12 seconds to actually load just one row. So let's go over to Barry VDH's GitHub page, and if you scroll down here you will see the installation instructions for it. So what you're going to want to do is copy this line here, and you're going to go over to your composer.json file. Let's just open that up. So inside my composer.json file, you'll see inside the require object, I've pasted that in there. We have Barry VDH Laravel Debug Bar. So get that pasted in there. And then the next thing you're going to want to do is go over to your app.php file and go over to the providers and also paste that into your providers. So we have Barry VDH Debug Bar / service provider. After you're done that, go over to your command line and you can type composer update. And what this is going to do is it's going to see that you don't have that package right now, and it's going to fetch it from the internet and it's going to save it into your vendor folder. So if I go over to my vendor folder, you'll see at the top of my vendor folder I have Barry VDH, and then if we drill down into this we have Laravel Debug Bar, src, and config, and then we have a config.php. So going into the config.php, you'll see that whether or not this debugger is running is dependent on this enabled index right here. So enabled is doing a config get on app.debug. So depending on what this returns is going to determine whether the debug bar is going to show or not. So the situation that we're faced with right now is because this debugger is going to give out a lot of sensitive information about our application and how it's working, we don't want this to run in production, but we do want it to show during development. So what we need is two sets of values for that, and we need our application to know whether it's in local development, and then to show the debugger accordingly. In an earlier video I talked about doing local configuration for Laravel, so I'm not going to talk about it in this one, but if I go over to my config folder, you'll see I have a local folder now. I created that in the previous video, and what you'll want to do is just create another create an app.php file here, and then what I'm doing is I'm returning an array, and inside here it has the value that I want to override. So if I go to the app.php inside the config folder, this is the production one, and you'll see that I have debug equals false, but inside my local app.php I want to override this. I want to set debug to true, and that way this debugger is also always going to show when I'm developing locally. So let's go back over to the FCL page now, and you'll see in the bottom left here I've actually just minimized the debugger. It is running now because I'm developing locally. So if we go down into the SQL statements here, you'll see that the first statement took 3.6 milliseconds, the next one actually took half a millisecond, and then the next one took 14.5 seconds. So let's take a look at what's happening inside this query that took 14 seconds, which is only selecting one row. You'll see this limit 1 at the end of it. We're selecting basically FCL.star, actually not all of the fields, but we're selecting a lot of columns from the FCL table, and then we're doing a left join on the messages table on messages.leadId is equal to FCL.id and messages.senderId is equal to 36033. If we go over into the lead controller, we can see the query builder code for that. You'll see that here I'm selecting from the FCL table. So FCL select, we're passing it the fields that we want to select, and then we have this arrow left join right here. So left join the messages table, and then inside the join closure, we're joining on messages.leadID is equal to fcl.id, and also where the sender ID is equal to my user ID. So the reason that this query is so slow is because the sender ID here is not indexed. So because we're using messages.leadID as a foreign key, we want this column indexed, and we also want sender ID indexed. So let's go over to MySQL, and I'm going to find that table. Let's see here. We have the messages table right here. I'm going to click on the structure tab, and then you'll see sender ID right here. Just before I make a change to that table structure, I want to show you this one SQL query that you can run, which is show index from messages. So if you run this query, show index from your table name, what it's going to do is it's going to show you all of the different indexes. You'll see that we don't have an index for sender ID right here. So going over to the structure of the messages table here, I'm just going to highlight the sender ID, and then we're going to click the index button, and it's going to say, do you really want to execute alter table messages, add index sender ID? And make sure when you're using PHPMyAdmin to always read the SQL that you're going to run before you do it. Don't just rely on the point and click interface. This is actually a really good chance to learn SQL. So make sure you read all of the queries that PHPMyAdmin will run for you. So here we're running alter table messages, add index, and it's being passed the sender ID. So we'll click OK right there. You'll see the query that was run. If I go back over to the indexes query here and I refresh this page, you'll see that a new row was added, and we have the key name is sender ID, the column name is sender ID. So let's go back over to the FCL page now, and we're going to refresh this page, and you can see the results of the left join query now. Here the exact same query was run, but this time sender underscore ID was indexed, and it took 3.59 milliseconds. So just adding the index on that table brought that from 14 seconds to 3.59 milliseconds. Another column that we can add an index on is messages.lead underscore ID here. If we go over to the messages, the show index query right here, you'll see that we currently don't have an index for this. Let's go over to the structure for the messages table. In lead ID, I'm going to click index, and it's saying, do you want to alter table messages, add index lead ID? I'm going to click OK. And let's just go back over to the query here. Even though it took 3.59 milliseconds, let's load the page again. And obviously there's not much performance difference there, but I think that column should be indexed as well. We can run it a couple more times. Now we get 3.6 milliseconds. Let's run it again, and 6 milliseconds. So the difference is really negligible. But I did find this one page about when to choose columns to index. So I'm basically, right now I'm just using this as a guide, and this is from IBM. And it says, when choosing columns to index, you should create indexes on columns that are used frequently in where clauses. You should create indexes on columns that are used frequently to join tables. So basically we've got both of our bases covered right there. There's a few more things. You should create indexes on columns that are used frequently in order by clauses. So there's a lot of different conditions here, but basically we've brought our query down to a few milliseconds now, so I'm not worrying about that too much more. If you're developing locally and you need to see the entire website and you don't want the debug bar getting in your way, you can just click the X in the top right there, and what that's going to do is just shrink it down to a little square in the bottom left. And actually, if you refresh the page, that's still small, so if you need it again, you can just click that button in the bottom left, and then it opens it up to its full size.